Alright, let's jump straight into it.
There's a lot of people that's jumping into the French Bulldog game, and there's a lot of people that's been here for quite some time. But the main question that continues to circulate is around how do I create this color coat or this color coat combination. 2024 was all about starting this page and allowing myself the ability to provide value to the YouTube marketplace for anybody that's searching about French Bulldogs. I think I did If you have any issues registering those French Bulldogs, I made a video you can find the link to here. Now let's discuss the first two standard colors in fawn and black. Fawn is more of a sandy color, coming in all shades from light tan to deep red.
I like them fawns.
Why did Amazon send me $20,000? Because I use Amazon AI. I'm going to show you a way to...
which depends on other locus alleles involved. For the purpose of this video, we will focus only on two kinds of fawns where their DNA profiles will read as little ay, or little ay, little at, if they are a fawn sable as shown. Fawn, when expressed, is dominant over all colors except brindle and cream. Black is a dog with two copies of the A locus read as little a, without the presence of two copies of rojo, dilute, or chocolate. This dog would show as a black dog with a solid coat all the way around. You can enhance the coat color by adding merle, brindle, pied, or tan points by adding those genetics. For example, a black dog with tan points will have the genetics of little at, without the presence of rojo, chocolate, or dilute locus. The S locus produces pied in dogs, which are white spotting patterns. Although it takes a DNA test to know the exact DNA of a French Bulldog that has white markings most likely has at least one copy of the S locus written as little n, little s. This may not always be the case though, as I'll explain a little later. A French Bulldog that is mostly white has two copies of pied written as little s, little s. Merle can come in any color and needs one copy of the Merle allele, written as big M, little n, or big M, little n to be expressed in the coat. As we start diving a little bit into our more exotic colors, I wanted to speak on Harlequin. In order for a dog to be considered Harlequin, it must have the presence of Merle as well as the H locus. Both the M locus for Merle and the H locus for Harlequin are both dominant genes, meaning it only takes one copy of each to express physically in the dog. Just like Merle, you cannot have a dog with two copies of the H locus, as any puppy that would express this would not be alive. While Merle dogs have a plethora of different combinations of spotting on their coat, Harlequin is a more intense version of that, where they have a little bit more white that shows in their fur as well. Think of Harlequin as a Merle dog with higher than normal intensities of white in their coat. While a French Bulldog can carry a copy of the H locus, it will still only express itself as Harlequin with the presence of Merle in the genetics. Not to jump around, but because of the questions I was receiving about the Harlequin, I did want to lump that in with Merle, although it's different. Let's talk about the last standard coat pattern, and that's brindle. Brindle is a dominant gene that will show physically in a dog unless it has two copies of cream. A brindle always has at least one copy of AY fawn, unless it is what we call a trindle, where they will have one copy of brindle written as KBR, or one or two copies of tan points written as little at, or little at, little a. Now, let's get into some of the more popular and exotic colors out there. Blue. There's a difference between the way a blue dog will show and a lilac one. In order for a dog to show as a true blue, they must have two copies of the dilute gene shown as little d, without the presence of two copies of cocoa. Chocolate. A chocolate Frenchie has two copies of cocoa shown as little co, without the presence of two copies of the dilute gene or two copies of cream, which covers everything. Similar to blue, but not to be confused, is lilac. This takes two copies of the dilute gene, little d, and two copies of chocolate, little co, in order to be considered lilac. Although a dog can carry one copy of other recessive genes, this is the combination that creates a true lilac. Cream, or little e, is dominant in all other coat colors as cream covers everything. While this is not an exotic color, it takes the presence of cream to create some of the more exotic ones, so I kind of lumped it in here with these. You see cream on the entire coat regardless of genetic combinations that would otherwise physically show, so in order to know what other genetics your cream dog has, you must get a full DNA test. Word to the wise when you're dealing with cream, although it is good to have a stud or a female dog that carries a copy of cream, to have a full cream dog, you increase the chance of covering up some of the more exotic colors. So be very, very careful with cream. Champagne. This is a dog that has 2 copies of Rojo, little b, and cream, little e, or 2 copies of Cocoa, little co, and cream, little e. Platinum is the combination of the dilute gene, Cocoa, and cream, and takes 2 copies of each to show up in a dog. This will show up in the DNA profile as little d, little e, and either little co, or little b, or both. Intensity, or little I, is more of a coat enhancement than a color that brings out more of the tan points in a dog. If you want the tan points of your dog to have more pop to them,
if you don't want to die from neuropathy, now is the time to stop taking gabapentin. If you suffer from neuropathy, I'm going to teach you the exact 1 5-second ritual that has...
Then you definitely want to find a stud that has 2 copies of intensity in its DNA. Rojo, or little b, used to be called testable chocolate and is a key ingredient to creating one of the more exotic colors that you will find today. Rojo in its true form is found when a dog carries 2 copies of an allele little b, with the absence of 2 copies of other recessive genes like dilute, cream, or cocoa. Isabella is a combination of a Frenchie that has 2 copies of the dilute gene written as little d, and 2 copies of Rojo written as little b. These dogs are not to be confused with lilac. Although lilac is an exotic color, it takes an Isabella dog that has 2 copies of Rojo to create the more sought after exotic colors. Isabella will show as a light caramel as shown, while lilac is more of a silver color. New shade Isabella. This is still one of the most highly sought after colors and a personal favorite of mine. In order for a Frenchie to be considered a new shade Isabella, it must possess 2 copies of 3 different recessive genes. The dilute gene, little d, Cocoa, little co, and testable chocolate / Rojo, little b. Big rope. Now let's address big rope. Although there is no genetic implications that you can test for to make sure your dog is a big rope, it's more of a look where your dog has a more pronounced snout and may have wrinklier skin. As I explained to you guys in the past, and I can actually prove it from the AKC DNA profile, these dogs were not just genetically modified. They actually were crossbred with Shar-Peis a long time ago, very specifically to those breeds. If you want to see a video about that, you can click on the link at the top right. The only thing that'll show up in a DNA profile that'll prove your dog is big rope, to my knowledge, is hidden pretty well in a 21-page document if you get the health portion of the DNA test from the AKC. If your dog not only visually shows signs of being a big rope and one of the parents is a big rope, the only thing as far as documentation that'll show it is on page 20 of 21 in this AKC DNA profile, and it's called Shar-Pei autoinflammatory disease. And if your dog is at risk, that's another documented indication. Pinks are albino dogs and probably the most rare and expensive kind of French Bulldog color out there. Well, at least they used to be. We'll get to that in a second. They have a white or off-white fur and pink skin and will show on the DNA profile as little a, or 2 copies of LAA in their DNA profile, depending on which source you use. These dogs can be distinguished from pied dogs because their eyes, nose, paw pads, and skin will have pink pigmentation to it. When I said that pink French Bulldogs were the most rare and expensive kind of French Bulldog out there, that has changed over the past year and a half. For all of you guys that have kind of been in this game for some years, you see trends come and they go. You see some come and they stay. One that I want to talk about is the Fluto, which clearly is not a French Bulldog. But again, if you guys have been following my page, you've heard me talk about this might not be such a bad thing for the breed. But every now and again, these dogs are crossbred with other breeds to bring certain characteristics to the dog, and people like it or they don't, but it also helps spread out the genetics of French Bulldogs to help them be an overall healthier dog. So Flutos are a mixture of French Bulldogs and Poodles. And if you mix those in with a bunch of these different colors, I've seen them go upwards of $100,000. That's considered the pantheon of breeding. I'm not sure if it's here to stay, but I can tell you personally, I cannot afford a $100,000 dog. So I don't breed those dogs. But the market is always determined by what people are willing to pay, and there is a demand for these dogs. Now, I'm not even sure if they go for $100,000 anymore, but if you're getting five-figure sums, $25,000, $40,000, $50,000 for your dogs, you are at the top of the game. Now, I'm not sure if these dogs are being recognized by the AKC or not. I just wanted to mention them because there are some pretty prestigious breeders out there that are breeding Flutos, and they might be here to stay. Moving right on along. Next on the list is the Eurogyro French Bulldog. This one is not as well known and is a little more rare and maybe not as popular, but we're going to discuss it anyway. The Eurogyro pattern in Frenchies is characterized by the presence of cream or white markings that appear on the underside of the dog's body, including the chest, neck, jaw, and the inside of the legs, as well as around the face. These patterns are almost exclusive to fawn French Bulldogs. While there is no DNA test to determine if a French Bulldog has Eurogyro, there is a theoretical U locus for it, and it would take 2 copies of this recessive gene to show in a French Bulldog. Visual fluffy French Bulldogs takes 2 copies of the L locus to produce.
This happens because there is no dementia in Israel. If you're a Christian and you don't know that the cure for Alzheimer's and dementia is in the Bible, you should read the scriptures again. I only recommend this biblical drink if you want.
But they have a little nuance. Although there are 4 different alleles of the long fur L locus in L1, L2, L3, and L4, you can still have a long fur French Bulldog from breeding a French Bulldog with 2 copies of L1 with a French Bulldog with 2 copies of L4. You would have to get a DNA test to differentiate which allele is expressed in the offspring though. Last but not least, Husky Koi. Husky resembles Pied, but it is not the same. It is imperative that if you want to know if you have a husky dog, you have to get a DNA test. With all of these dogs, to know what your dog has and be able to produce, you cannot skip the DNA test. If you guess, you're probably going to miss, and there's no way to predict once you breed with another dog what they're going to produce. Huskies, just like Big Rope, originate from another breed. Shar-Peis for Big Rope and Panda Pugs for Husky. Koi, whose name originates from the actual fish, have distinct coat patterns with blue eyes. It can become a little bit confusing because Koi is just Merle combined with Husky, who looks like Pied. But I would say also you can look at the eyes of these dogs, and if you got a French Bulldog that develops past 6 months and keeps their blue eyes, odds are you have a Husky Koi if it has white in its pattern. There is no DNA test specifically for Husky Koi because, again, this is a crossbred dog that was brought back to French Bulldogs to resemble French Bulldogs, just widening the characteristics that are available in these dogs. And just like Flutos, we'll see if these dogs are here to stay in the future, but right now they're here and they're popular and the demand continues to go up for them. Personally, I'm all for all these different variations of French Bulldogs. Although I don't inbreed or line breed, there is an appreciation for bringing out some more characteristics for these beautiful dogs and ensuring that we have more variety and keeping them healthier over the course of generations of dogs. I still think that New Shade Isabella is the best color, and other combinations of coat textures that go along with that, like Fluffy. You can also get the Velvets, which also comes from the Big Rope because of their crossbreeding with Shar-Peis, but that's just me. Today we've explored the vast array of hues that make these puppies so special and exactly why this breed is the most popular dog breed in the world right now.
And tell me what y'all think, man. Like, comment, subscribe. Content creators is in the details below.